Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you might be around the world. Thank you for taking the time today to join our webinar with Reggie Gardner, Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer. Reggie's going to take your questions today and hopefully help you improve how you're working. We can go to the next slide, Lindsay. So just real brief about this series. This is a series we've been running for, I guess, about 6 or 7 months now, maybe a little bit more. And it's a great way to give you an opportunity to ask questions and hopefully get the answers that you need. Any questions that we don't get to, we will try to answer via email following this session as well. So Reggie will take that list and try to respond to your questions the best that he can. So please feel free to ask and we will take it from there. Next slide. So just briefly, who is Scrum.org? For those of you not familiar, Scrum.org was founded by Ken Schwaber. Ken is our chairman and founder. He's also the co-creator of Scrum. Ken continues to drive forward the work that we do around training and certification and really providing a foundation for how people learn and how people continue to evolve Scrum. So we've got lots of free resources up on our website, like this webinar, for example, and many other things to help people continue in their growth with a focus on improving professionalism and how we build and deliver products to market today. Next slide. So Reggie, I'll let you talk a little bit about yourself.
Okay, great. Well, I'm happy to be here. It's going to be exciting, I hope. I'm a longtime developer. I actually spent a long time working for one company, almost 15 years, that I just recently left at the top of this year. And that was definitely a startup when I got there. And I started as a developer and ended up wearing a lot of hats, from product owner to Scrum Master to, by the end, really trying to help champion a full Agile transformation across a much larger organization, especially a lot of hardware engineers that weren't exposed previously to any type of Agile or Scrum or more formal team practices. So that was a really interesting challenge. More recently, I switched to Sling. I work full-time at Sling as a developer and manager, kind of splitting between those two. And also I'm a Scrum trainer with Scrum.org, and that I pursued that really when I was at the previous organization. I needed some help doing an Agile transformation. I needed to find a group that was more experienced and knowledgeable than I was, and I pursued the PST path and found it to be very fruitful, the most helpful and engaging community, and I found answers that I've been seeking for a long time. So that's kind of a little bit about how we ended up here today.
Great, thanks, Reggie. If we go to the next slide. So real quick, please ask your questions. You can see in the toolbar, hopefully you have that GoToWebinar toolbar and control panel open. Please type your questions and we will take it from there. Microphones will be muted, of course, and then this will also, of course, be recorded and available for you to review, and we'll send out details over the next day or so. So with that, we've got some questions starting to come in, so we can get started.
All right.
So here we go. That's a big one. I just need to make my window a little bit larger there. Okay, so my team struggles with relative estimation. They're using story points and seem to still insist that's the amount of time used for a task. Do you have any suggestions on how to communicate that story points don't always correlate with time as closely, but rather the effort when sizing? I feel that the time spent that the team is spending a lot of time splitting hairs on hours associated with a task rather than really doing relative estimates.
Okay, yeah, excellent question. I think a lot of people have questions about relative sizing techniques. It's certainly not a natural thing. And just let me make note, none of that is part of the official Scrum guide. So doing story points isn't an official Scrum thing, but it's a common complementary practice that most Scrum teams I'm aware of actually use. So certainly very common thing. The way it helps me to think about story points is I think of it more as, yes, it's effort, yes, it's how much work is this, but I think of it in terms of distance sometimes. How far away are we as a team from achieving this deliverable? this story or this feature, whatever it may be. And that sizing has nothing to do with how fast we're traveling as a team, because there are a lot of different things that are going to affect our velocity. But if we have some typical understanding as a team is what we mean by this size of a story means it's probably about this far away for us, then that helps us to stabilize and have more of a consistent velocity moving forward. But it's a really tricky thing to get your head wrapped around. It's not equated to time. It's just relative to each other.
So do you have any suggestions, Reggie, on how to convince the team or get the team to understand that? Have you any techniques that you've used?
Yeah, I wish I had some really good techniques. Really, it's just a lot of discussion. Sometimes a lot of one-on-one discussion about what we mean, why it's relative, why it's not equatable to time, why working in time isn't very useful because we can't predict. We're working in an unknown domain. So I wish I had a better technique for you, but really it comes down to finding some mental model that people can grab onto and understand. This is what we mean by relative sizing.
Great. So having worked in organizations in the past and not just been out there as a consultant, I think this is a great question for you from Alona. How do you promote Agile within a larger organization? Ones that aren't traditionally thinking in an Agile way. What are some of the things that you've done to help promote that, or suggestions that you have to help people promote why Agile is of value?
Sure, that's a very relevant question, very challenging. For me, it's all about, we're not really trying to do Agile well, we're really trying to run an organization, find success, deliver business value, enjoy coming to work and helping people grow and learn and improve and progress. So for me, it's less about framing it as Agile and more about what is the best things we can do to succeed. And for me, it's been the Agile Scrum path is the best framework and approaches and ideals and techniques that help us to get there. So convincing an organization of that it may or may not be challenging. It's going to start though with where are our challenges, where are we really falling short? Maybe we're just not delivering, maybe our people aren't satisfied with work, maybe there's a lot of turnover. Whatever the challenges are, let's look for a better way to do things. And one thing I love about Scrum is we have different names and techniques. Yes, it's becoming more mainstream, but still it's a little weird to have a title like Scrum Master. What does that mean? So let's use some different terminology, some different techniques to try to elevate and help people understand this is a different way and hopefully a much better way of doing things. And it's going to take some time usually to maybe roll out. Maybe you start with one team and it grows organically, or maybe you can convince upper leadership to, start with a big training initiative and train a bunch of people at once. But normally it seems to me it works better if you start small, have some success with a team or two or three, and let it kind of grow organically. And I like to think of almost everything we do as an experiment. So it's usually easy to convince in a company, let's run this as an experiment with one team and see how it goes. Maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year. And let's get some data and find out what we can learn from that.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, Reggie. And there's some good information out on the Scrum.org website that talks about this as well. I mean, if you look at the first ever project, or one of the first ever projects that Ken Schwaber ran, and introduced Scrum to at Fidelity, and there's a video that Ken did on it. I'll look it up and I'll throw it in the chat in a minute. But basically, he saw a team that was struggling to deliver something. This was quite a long time ago, and Fidelity was looking to roll out a new web-based trading platform. Wow, we've come a long way. But what did he do? He walked in and said, "Oh, don't give me tons of people. Don't give me a whole bunch of money. Just give me 30 days." And he assembled a small team and delivered something within 30 days to start getting feedback and to improve. And that's how Fidelity actually got into the online trading business. But it's exactly what you said, Reggie. It's about that. Let's get some proof. Let's get some evidence. Let's not talk. let's actually
Yes.
do.
Yes, take some action. Let's get something done here, for sure.
Exactly. So I think that's great. So Reggie, what are your thoughts on the product owner doing development work as well? This particular person, Neil's in a situation where the PO knows the technology being used. Is it possible, or is it a good idea for them to also put on their dev hat?
Interesting. I think a lot of people have this question. So the good news is the Scrum Guide doesn't say you can't do anything like that. You can have same person be a development team member and a product owner. The challenge is they are very different roles, and one of our core values in Scrum is focus. So most product owners I know could easily fill their day and more with product owner type tasks. And so I never say you can't, given the situation, the background, the environment. Maybe that's the right thing exactly. And you can discover that as a team together, which is, again, one thing I love about Scrum is it's about discovering what works in your situation with your people. But it is challenging to do that. There's going to be a lot of potential conflicts as product owner hat versus development hat. I just want to get in and do this versus convince the team what's the most priority, top priority things to work on. So it can certainly be done, but I would really challenge you to consider trying it full-time product owner and learning how to do it that way and then see how it goes. But again, it's about discovering what works in your situation with your people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. And you hit the nail on the head there with the whole conflict of interest. Right? If the product owner is also developing, how do they deal with all those conflicts? And also one of the biggest things is making sure the product owner is available to the team. And if they're two heads down focused on development, are they making themselves available to the team?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to collaborate with everybody, so you got to be available.
So kind of following along the product owner lines here, if a product owner is attending the daily Scrum every day and asking status from the team, the Scrum Master suggests the product owner that this is not a status meeting, but the PO continues doing the same thing. Have you had these examples? Do you have suggestions on how to maybe improve that interaction?
Yes, that's a challenging one. And it's so common because product owners want to be involved. They want to know what's going on. Hopefully they're just trying to help the team to deliver. And the daily Scrum is a really interesting meeting. So many teams do it so differently. I do really appreciate the Scrum.org approach of the daily Scrum is by the team for the team. It's about what are we going to do to work together to meet our sprint goal. And we got to make a plan and for the next 24 hours. That's the daily Scrum. I've never seen a team do that without having some form of status, though, because we've got to know where we are in order to make a plan for where we're going to go in the next few hours. So I always hear some form of status at the daily Scrum, and that's usually useful information for the product owner. So in general, I would think it's helpful and healthy to have the product owner attending that meeting. But if it's causing problems with the team, then we got to have a conversation with that product owner about how to not disrupt or distract the team, maybe just go and listen and observe, or maybe take a break for a while and try to learn through other means what's happening. But again, what's going to work with your people and your situation is going to be a little different all the time.
Great. So kind of getting back to measurement a little bit, have you seen good ways to measure Scrum progress and coach improvement of measuring how the team is working with Scrum? Or so I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but are you really measuring Scrum, or are you just measuring how the team works?
Measurement is very challenging. We'd love to be data driven, right? That's where these measurements come from. We want to be data driven instead of just going with our gut or subjective decision making all the time. What the real core of the problem here is the most important things really can't be measured. I mean, how do you measure the trust that's between the team members? And I always go back to the Agile Manifesto when it comes to measurement, which is working software is the primary measure of success. So I've been in the trap of measuring lots of things like velocity, rate of defect input into the product, rate of defect being fixed, lead time, all sorts of different measurements, and not actually delivering anything of value consistently from our sprints. And those are completely useless measurements if we're not actually delivering value. So it's a really challenging thing to figure out, what are we going to measure that's important, that won't be gamed, won't be used to distract the team from what's really important, which in my mind is we're working together collaboratively to deliver business value, the right business value, as quickly as possible. And so some measurements might help us kind of get an idea of how that's going, but it's never the most important thing to be looking at.
And I just posted a link in the chat as well around evidence-based management, which is a great way to look at everything. It's not just looking at the team, but it's a great measurement platform or a set of agile metrics to look at in effectiveness. And at the end of the day, it comes down to, as Reggie said, it comes down to value. Are we delivering value to the business, to the customer, and to the market? And there's a whole set of values you can learn from there. There's a great guide to help you measure as well. So check that out. Again, the link's in the chat.
Yeah, I agree. EB and it's very good to look at.
So what do you do when a product owner is resistant to Agile? Or really resistant to anything that you suggest as a Scrum Master, which should help them, the team, self-organize? How do you get a product owner on board?
Yeah, wow, that could be tough. So I'm not sure I've been in that exact situation. I've seen two different models. Sometimes the product owners are too engaged and got their hands in every little detail, and sometimes they're too distant and distracted, not available to the team. So I'm not sure which category this is in. Maybe they're involved but don't believe in the Agile thing. Maybe that's what it sounds like. That's going to be a challenge. I would have some long conversations, look at some training, probably share some resources, videos, books, that type of thing. Try to get them to go to a training class if they could. For example, of course, Scrum.org's professional product owner class would be excellent. But at the end of the day, if they're not going to get on board, I do this with everybody. If you're not in a situation where you can thrive, then it might be an opportunity to move you to a situation where you will be better suited. And sometimes that's the right choice for everybody involved. It's just to move them to a better environment that matches their desires and skill set.
We need buy-in, and buy-in from the top as well as buy-in from the bottom and all the way up, I think, is critical to the team's success. And kind of what you touched on there is perfect, which is it's about really evidence. It comes back to evidence and proving that we're delivering the right things and delivering what is really needed in the end. So moving on to the next question, as a Scrum Master, to what extent is natural leadership among the development team beneficial, and to what extent does it result in an anti-pattern? I've seen some instances of a member of a team assigning work to another team member, for instance, and I've emphasized to people outside the team that there is no team lead in Scrum when they view some team members as such. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with people who are trying to take on this lead role? Is leadership okay within the Scrum team?
Well, yes, we want leadership. Leadership is a great thing. So Scrum teams are supposed to self-organize. And if they self-organize into somebody taking more of a leadership role, and that's working for them, and they're still collaborating, all the voices are being heard, they're not suppressing opinions or points of view, then maybe that's a great thing. Maybe somebody that's assigning tasks just has a natural talent for being able to break down the work and what's next and what's most important. And if they're great at that and the team is open to that, then it's probably not the worst thing. It might be a strength. What I would want them to work on, though, is not having the team rely on that, but helping everyone to rise up to understand and be able to make the decisions for what is the most important thing and figure that out. I don't have to wait for my team member to tell me. I can look at the backlog, look at the product, and figure out, oh, this is the next thing, I'm available, I should work on this. So we want that leadership. We want people engaged, inspiring, but we want them to be teaching and lifting each other, not trying to hold people back or take ownership of dominion over the team responsibilities or anything like that.
Great. So all right, let's take yourself back a few years to becoming a new Scrum Master. What's some of the best advice that you have and that you give to new Scrum Masters during your training, but in general, as you're coaching and working with new folks? So what is some of the best advice that you can give to a brand new Scrum Master?
Well, that's a big question. So let's see here. The things, maybe I could go from one of the biggest mistakes that I've made when I was a new Scrum Master and trying to help other new Scrum Masters. So one of those mistakes was focusing too much on the mechanics, the process, the events, and the measurements, and not nearly enough on the energy and the motivation and the healthy team interactions. So one of the first principles in Agile Manifesto is about its individuals' interactions over processes and tools. And if you're new to Scrum, you can start easily to get focused on, well, how do we organize the backlog, and how do we do our relative sizing techniques, and how do we put that all into a system and put it up onto some electronic board that we can work with at our daily Scrum. And it's really easy to get sucked into all those mechanical things and miss the most important things, which is the people side. We've got to have people that are energized, excited, motivated, engaged in the work and working together to solve the problems. So kind of the core mantra of the Scrum Master is not to come up with a solution, but to take the problem to the team and engage the team in coming up with how to improve or solve whatever the problem at hand is. And that's really important to me, is to focus on the people side and to taking everything to the team and engaging them. And humans are so creative. It's amazing to see what solutions people will come up with. When I've done this, I've just been amazed at what teams have been able to come up with, much better than ideas I've had, even when I've been experienced in the realm. So definitely take it to the team, focus on the people side. We want teams to be alive in the best sense. They should be having fun together, not the type of complacent, take it easy fun, but we're engaged in meaningful work and we're enjoying working together. And that's kind of the outcomes that I'm looking for. So avoid the zombie Scrum, mechanical Scrum, focus on the energy and the Scrum values. The 5 Scrum values are always going to come into play here. You've got to develop those 5 values in the people, and you'll just see life and energy flow into the team as you do so.
Yeah, there's a great case study of a company that they call it a Scrum Reboot, and I'll post that in a link in a few minutes. But they did exactly that. They saw that Scrum failed, and when they realized why it failed is they didn't adhere to the Scrum values. So they did a reboot, and they've been super successful now. And it's because they made the Scrum values at the heart of everything they do. Rather than just going through mechanical Scrum, as you said, Reggie, it's really about the way we live, the way we work, the way we think, and it's cool to see. So kind of along these lines, a little bit of some of what you were talking about, make it fun, make it part of what you do. A great question here. Do you have any ideas on how to make the Scrum events, such as retros and so on, more fun and more engaging? Before you answer that, I'll post a link in here as well. We've got a great site that some of our trainers have put together called tastycupcakes.org. I'll post that link in there, which has a whole bunch of activities and things you can do. But what are some of the things, Reggie, that you do to make the events more engaging?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a really common thing for sure. I hear reports of lots of teams that don't even want to go to the retrospective. It's not interesting to them. They don't want to be there. And so that's a challenge as Scrum Master to make it interesting, useful, productive for sure. For me, it all boils down to getting everyone engaged. So probably the least effective way that I know to do it is just to sit around and stare at each other and maybe try to have a conversation that way. There's so many activities that have been developed out there, like Eric just posted, tastycupcakes.org. And there's so many more. There's books and wikis and videos and tons. So find something, find an activity that's going to engage the team. I really believe in letting team members write down. So sticky notes, obviously one of the major tools for Scrum Masters. But I just find such a difference if everybody takes a few minutes to write some things versus just trying to have a conversation where a lot of people might stay quiet, won't contribute. I want to get something from everyone in every retrospective. A lot of times with teams, we might establish some kind of foundational retrospective activity we're going to do every time that we can kind of have a baseline time, maybe not forever, but maybe for a few months we're going to do a certain activity. But then I usually seed that with some other activity so that every time we mix it up, we get some different ideas flowing. And then every time we have something that's a little bit similar and familiar, so that people know, okay, we're going to bring that back and put it into this format we all understand and can work with, and use that for improvement. So the point of the retrospective and all the events really is to improve how we're working and operating as a team. So we want to take that and do something useful, put it into action. So if you'll start small and then take some improvement and actually put it in and improve, and if you try to improve and you fail, that's okay, because it was an experiment and we learn from that. That's one of the core ideas, is that everything is like an experiment. We take some action. If it succeeded, great. We learn something. If it failed, great. We learn something, and in both cases, we can adapt and continue to improve. So take those activities, use them, put them into practice to do something different, improve in some way, make it a goal that goes in your backlog, because the Scrum Guide informs us some sort of improvement for the next sprint, and then come back and do that again and again, and use that to build up some momentum and energy and make those retrospectives engaging for the team so that they want to come there, they want to participate.
Great, thanks, Reggie. So it seems like we have a lot of product owner questions today, or actually, how does the Scrum Master work with and deal with difficult product owners? In this scenario, the product owner is also the CTO. So, generally you try not to have management that aren't part of the Scrum team in a retrospective, but since the CTO is also the product owner, how do you deal with a situation where the team is not opening up and we're not having successful retrospectives because the CTO, as the product owner, is in the room during retrospectives? Do you have any suggestions there?
Well, that's a very interesting situation. It took me a long time to figure out why it was often so challenging for management to be in the room. I mean, I worked for a small organization where there's a lot of trust for a long time. I certainly experienced other organizations where it wasn't so healthy, but there was an article I read some time ago called The Invisible Gun, which talked about how anybody who has pay authority in an organization is carrying around an invisible gun, and everyone around them is aware that they could use that at any time, even if they've never threatened or indicated they would in any way. So the challenge is there's got to be probably the team's not feeling safe. They're not feeling psychological safety to really open up and be transparent about their concerns, about what's going on. And that's going to be a challenging one to overcome, because at the same time, there's going to be a lot of benefits of having the CTO be product owner. You've got engagement from a high-level executive who can probably get a lot of things done and help drive the success of the team in a lot of ways. So somehow you're going to have to explore some ways to make that safe. And I don't have any answers directly. It's going to be an interesting situation to try to resolve.
Is it possible to kind of do a two-part retro? Would that make sense?
Yeah, you could certainly have a retro without the CTO, the product owner, present for maybe part of it, and then bring him in and have other things. Certainly, that would be a great thing to try.
Great. So I don't know how much experience you have with this. I know I have lots of working remotely, as we were talking about as we prepared for this. But a team wants to work remotely on Fridays. Do you have any recommendations on maintaining engagement and they use the word stand-ups? It's not called a stand-up, it's called a daily scrum for many reasons, including the fact that the minute you call it a stand-up, it becomes a status meeting, as we talked about earlier. But also, not everybody can stand up. Sorry, it's one of my hot buttons. Are conducted using online collaboration tools. So do you have any recommendations for how do you maintain engagement in a daily scrum if people are working remotely?
Yes, let me note, I also have the same situation of calling them stand-ups and then had a team member that couldn't stand up, and quickly learned it's really a daily scrum, not a stand-up. So thank you for that point. Again, this is an area I have a ton of experience. I'm actually more in that situation now, more recently where I'm working today than I have been in the past. But if you've still got to find a way to do the daily scrum effectively. So if you can do it, and we have tons of technology, obviously, as we're using today. If you can use some form of video chat so that you can see each other and see what's going on, I think that helps a lot. But just keeping the communication flow. And again, if it's one day a week, it's probably not the most concerning thing to me, especially the last day of the week. You'd probably be okay if the daily scrum wasn't the most effective on that day, as long as you're staying in good collaboration and good communication. That's the things I'd worry about with a team that's remote in any situation are we really understanding each other? Are we able to communicate and collaborate as we need? Are we able to use that day effectively? I would hope it would be used as a day to really concentrate and deep dive onto some challenging problems and come up with some solutions, which developers crave, in my experience, some time and space and quiet to be able to focus and concentrate. So I'd hope they would use it that way, and then just find some way to make the daily scrum helpful to them, probably with some form of technology.
Yeah, and I've worked on many remote teams. I've spent a large part of my career working remotely. My current team is certainly partially remote, but I can give a good example. When we redesigned the Scrum.org website, and this actually touches another question that's in there too, so we can jump to that. But we worked with a third party. We brought in a Scrum website development organization that had expertise in the technologies we were using and website development and design. We had a product owner living on the Scrum.org side. We had a Scrum Master living on the side of the agency. We had developers on both sides. So we had developers that were Scrum.org employees and developers that were employees of the agency. Nobody was in the same office. We had folks in different time zones. We had people out on the West Coast here in the US. We had folks in Central Time Zone as well as on the East Coast. And we used technology to do that. We did pair programming using Google Hangouts and other technologies where we could share screens and even take over screens. So we were doing pair programming. We were running our daily scrums. And we used, Jira. In this case, we used Jira as our backlog board. We were using GitHub to share as a repository and so on. But it was no different. We actually were no different than if we were sitting across from each other by leveraging technology. No, you couldn't quickly say, "Hey, Joe, blah blah blah," but you almost could because we used Slack as well and had a Slack channel. So almost as quickly and probably less disruptive, because if Joe was busy, they would take a few seconds to be disrupted by the question rather than the instant disruption. So it does work, but it does also, of course, take discipline. Now, getting the team engaged on the daily took a bit more skill from the Scrum Master, making sure that everybody was engaged, because you can't read the body language, and that's the hardest part. We used video though. So everybody was on video, so you could read faces and read body language in that way at least. So hopefully that helps. So there was another question that ties to this that I thought I'd hit on. I wasn't going to. It wasn't next in order, but because it kind of tied to this question, I thought I would hit on it. Now, of course, I cannot find it. Sorry.
You lost it, huh?
Oh well, yeah, I lost it. Anyway, let's move on to another question. We'll come back to that one when I find it. So in an organization that does personal performance-based reviews, bonuses, and salaries, have you seen other reward systems that you'd recommend that better support Scrum, or how to support Scrum in an organization that things are based on personal performance?
So pay is a really challenging area. There's no perfect way to do it that I'm aware of. I'd love to be proven wrong on that point. But it's very easy for it to go badly and to cause a lot of harm, and there's a lot of chatter about that. There's tons of studies and opinions about that. Some people believe the best you can do with a pay system is just to not cause harm. You can't actually get advantage out of it. I hope we can do better than that, but it is very challenging. I've seen the individual pay, the kind of pay for performance, merit pay, cause a lot of problems. Individuals competing with each other instead of working as a team to align behind the goals of the team and even the organization. So the best I've seen is some form of profit sharing, where it's, if we succeed together, there's a bigger amount of money coming in, and we can distribute a portion of that among everybody. So we all succeed together instead of individually competing for a bigger piece of the bonus pool or something like that. But there's lots of opinions out there. It's really challenging. I had a lot of opinions before I was much involved in that, and then I feel like I had to eat a lot of humble pie trying to figure out how to actually make it something usable and that works. Really challenging. But I think we're getting better. I think we're understanding the importance of team, importance of aligning our pay systems with the way we want to operate, which is definitely moving to more of a flatter structure where the work is done in teams. The teams are the delivery mechanism, and we've got to find a way to have our pay systems match and support that model.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I saw I met with the VP of HR in London for Capital One Group in London, and she did a presentation at an event I was at where she talked about how they were restructuring the whole team's compensation plan around the fact that it was as a team, not as an individual. But that's hard to do. That's rip and replace. You're making significant changes. So now people are reliant on the team members, which there's some good of that because now they're holding each other accountable. But it makes it tough. But it's even at a developer level, it's hard to, how do you even measure an individual's contribution when it comes to development, really? Hopefully we're not counting story points or function points and things like that, but it's real value delivered to the business. One thing that I have seen work somewhat better, but still tough, is part of a bonus structure is based on how the team performs, and in this case, the product. So kind of the profit share, like you were talking about, Reggie, and then part of it was on individual performance and 360 review performance and things like that. But there is no magic here. There is no silver bullet solution. It's a tough one.
It really is a big challenge in our day. One thing I'd mention is what I would love to see is that they don't destroy the team so much. If a team is really performing well together, then we need to focus much less on the individual contributions within that team, because the skill sets people bring are so different. And if the team is working, that's what we want. We shouldn't care so much if one person has less output or contribution in one area, because they're probably contributing in some other area that's maybe less visible or less tangible. And so if a team is performing, let's encourage that. Let's not break that with some form of individual performance assessment that's going to damage that team.
Yep. I think that's great. So I just lost it again. My bad. There we go. Sorry, Rob. I found your question. So if introducing Scrum to a customer who has not used Agile in the past, and the customer normally does fixed budget and expectations of timescale for their projects, do you have any tips to get them to move more toward an empirical approach?
Well, it's definitely going to be a major paradigm shift, going from that to the agile way. How to engage that customer and help them understand is going to be certainly an opportunity to have some deep conversations about it. What helped me was to really understand the Kniffen model of complexity, where pretty much all product development, especially in the technology world these days, lives in that complex domain where more is unknown than known. And so everything we're doing in Agile is trying to almost do an end run around the fact that we can't really predict what's going to happen. So instead of predictability, we can give you transparency. So this is what I want to approach the customer and say, I can't tell you that in 6 months, for this much money, we'll exactly deliver this amount of features and this quality level. But what we can do is every sprint, we know how much a sprint's going to cost. So we can run a sprint, and every sprint, by the end, you can see exactly where we are. We've delivered something of value, something working, and you'll have full access to see how it's working, and you can have input to change it. And there's a lot of stories rolling around about how generally, I don't know if it's generally, but it's possible to deliver what the company is asking for in a shorter time frame at a lower cost, just because they can stay close to it, they can see where it's really at, make the adjustments, and then once they've got enough value, they can be done. And so if you can approach it open-ended like that, where it might be mutually beneficial to end the engagement early because the company got what they wanted and you're happy to move on to other things, then that's a win-win. And that's what we're looking for. But teaching a company to understand that transparency is what they want instead of predictability is a different mindset, and it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, and I've got I'll post as well. I did a webinar on how we worked with our agency, which kind of ties to this, and the work that we did. I'll throw that up in there in a moment. But a lot of it, people want to pay for fixed costs, right?
Right.
Especially if I'm the payer, and I want to say you're going to deliver this. Now, any project I've ever worked on, and I've been working in software development since the early 90s, none of them ever at the end delivered what we thought we were going to deliver in the beginning. So I generally start with that conversation and go from there. And one of the things that I have found is when working with a client is not making them guarantee all the way through. So buying in sprints. Now, this is sometimes hard for the financial folks to want to absorb, but often what I've done in these scenarios is, okay, we will buy, say, 6 sprints. Well, you're buying a Scrum team or whatever for X number of sprints with a 2 sprint out. So you're not just at the end of a sprint saying, all right, get out. There's some financial backing to protect the agency or whatever. The contractor. So, okay, you're buying 6 sprints, and there's always a 2 sprint out so that you're not cutting it loose on day 30 of sprint 1, but it's starting to build that in. And what I have seen is over time, they really like this model, but it does take them a lot to get over that hurdle.
Yeah, exactly.
So another question, this is an interesting one, and I'm sure you've got some good insight on this. What's the difference between a Scrum Master, a product owner, and a product manager?
Okay, so this is a great opportunity to go to the official Scrum Guide, and it does a great job of explaining the roles of a Scrum team. So the product owner, I like to think of as the value maximizer. They make the decisions for the team as far as what to build, what are those priorities, what's going to deliver the most value. They're going to do that. The only way they can do it successfully is by collaborating with a lot of people, including the development team, because the development team can have a lot of insights into how much effort things are to build. They might have some ideas for innovation, things the product owner isn't aware of that's possible with the technology and so on. So we think that product owner is, they're the decision maker as far as what to build, what's going to drive value. And then the Scrum Master is a little more nuanced. The Scrum Masters, they're officially the servant leader of the team, which means it's their role to help the team succeed. everybody in their roles to succeed and to succeed within the organization. Sometimes there's a lot of healthy models for how Scrum Masters engage with team. I love the 8 stances that you can read about on scrum.org's blog. The common ones people think of as impediment remover, that if there's something blocking the team that they can't solve for themselves, Scrum Master's job to make that happen. And I've been in a situation where I was with an organization for a long time, and as Scrum Master, I was very valuable in that role. I knew who to go talk to in the organization to make things happen, to change things, to get things done. And so sometimes that's the thing, but overall, it's finding lots of ways to help the team succeed, including the product owner, and helping everyone to be more, have a better understanding and to grow and progress and have healthy working models. So the Scrum Master role is really challenging, and besides just the team, the Scrum Master also has the responsibility of helping the organization as a whole to be more agile, to improve, to be a better place to work, and to be a place that gets more done. Product management, that's a different role. It's actually outside of Scrum. It's not one of the official Scrum roles. So there's going to be a lot of different opinions on what that means and how it works. A lot of the scaling models will have some form of that. It might be called product manager. It might be called something else. It's a traditional type role, and the way some companies did it traditionally, it matched almost perfectly with the product owner, and sometimes it was completely different. And so there's so much variation, it's hard to say exactly what the product manager is, but the product owner role is very well defined. It's in the Scrum Guide, and that's one of the benefits of Scrum, is that it is so well defined. You can go and look at it, understand it, and start running with that role.
Great, thanks, Reggie. And yeah, read the Scrum Guide. I think that's a great start. And one of the things that often comes up is there's no reason a product manager and product owner can't work together. The product owner doesn't have to be all-knowing. They're just empowered and responsible or accountable. But most teams I've worked with have business analysts or product managers working with the product owner for different subject matter expertise and so on. So here's a good one. How do we've all dealt with this? How do you handle a team member that always rambles while getting their point across during meetings?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's tough, because you want everybody to feel safety and feel like they can contribute and share. If someone's dominating or not, just not very efficient or concise, that's a unique opportunity to just probably work. I'd probably work with that person one-on-one a little bit. How can we make better use of our time, keep our comments a little more concise, maybe help them prepare ahead of time what they want to try to, or how they can improve their personal communication effectiveness. But sometimes you just have to cut people off, or maybe have some team thing, like the rabbit ears, we're going down a rabbit hole, let's move on, or the one's popular on here is Elmo, enough, let's move on. So maybe you need some sort of team practice to cut people off if you have to, but in general, we want people to contribute, so let's try to give everyone space to contribute.
Great. So we have time probably for one or two more. Have there been things that you've done in your years as a Scrum Master to look at and evaluate the competency levels of a Scrum Master?
I don't know if there's a formal way to really do that. There's so much nuance and subtlety to the Scrum Master role. So the most important thing is that they really care about the team. I'd recommend reading The Boys in the Boat. It's a great book anyway, but it talks a lot about you have to want to care that everyone else around you succeeds as much as you personally succeed. And that's really the heart of the Scrum Master is I want to work as a team, and I want us to all be better together. And so what that looks like exactly is probably going to be a little different for every person based on their experiences, their strengths, their personality. But if they're really engaged, they really care about that, and they're really seeking for ways to improve themselves. And it's worth noting the Scrum Master path is a path of self-mastery. You have to be willing to improve yourself and work on that, and that comes first. And then if you're doing that and you're putting the goals and the success of the team as your main priority, that's what I would really look for. The individual skills and techniques are varied, and there's lots of great resources. I want them to be great facilitators, coaches, mentors, teachers, good at lots of different things. But it's really about helping everyone to succeed and caring that they succeed individually. You've got to see every person as a human being with challenges, with hopes, with dreams, with feelings, and really work to help every individual and the team to be its best.
Great, thank you, Reggie, and thank you, everybody. In an effort to make sure that we meet our time box, I'd like to thank you, Reggie, for taking the time today and answering questions. Thank you, the audience, and we didn't get to them all, and we'll, like I said in the beginning, we'll try to get to the rest via email, but thank you. Lindsay, if you can go to the next slide, please. So just real quick, keep your learning going. We have a set, and these are free, just like this webinar, of learning paths out on the scrum.org website. You can just click resources for, or go to the homepage and you'll see those learning paths. We've got them for Scrum Masters, product owners, the development team members, as well as Agile leaders. Lots of resources, videos, blogs, articles, and other things to help you keep learning. And it's all about continuing to learn. Next slide. So with that, again, I want to say thank you. Thank you to the audience. Thank you, Reggie, for taking your time out today. Continue to follow us on LinkedIn and ask your questions in the forums. There are lots of people with lots of different experiences, always answering questions in the forums. Read our blogs and keep joining these webinars. Thank you again and have a great day.